have a very Catholic taste in music. Shall we start with something classical? Death and Transfiguration by Richard Strauss, conducted by Otto Klemperer. I'd always wanted to go to Hollywood. This was an idée fixe that had been with me for years. Ever since I remember Tom Mix, who was the great cowboy star when I was a young boy, and I suppose I really wanted to be a cowboy, I imagine. I was so lucky because I had the great pleasure of meeting him when I was in repertory in Nottingham. The Variety Theatre was right opposite, the stage doors were right opposite each other, the so-called legitimate theatre and the Variety Theatre, and he was on at the Variety Theatre, and I went across just to see him because I loved his work so much, and he was absolutely charming. I was very moved and touched to find that he couldn't read or write, and he asked me if I would witness a cross on his contract and also to read the contract. He knew what should be in the contract, even if he couldn't read it, that I would just read it out to him and then witness his cross, which I found very, very somehow deeply moving, that this man I admired so much that I could do just that tiny little service for him. And perhaps you will like to hear his voice with me on an old recording that the BBC has. I hope you'll enjoy it. Tom Mix. The reason I went to Hollywood was because I'd always wanted to go. I think it was literally a case of a fool stepping in where angels fear to tread. Had I known all the things that I know now about the business, I'd never dream of going any more than I dream of trying to learn to drive a car today. I mean, I was lucky to learn to drive a car when there's no one else on the road but myself, and once learnt you never forget. My dear father paid my passage for me. I often wonder why it was only one way. Within 10 days of arriving in Hollywood, I got a job with Edward Small Productions in a film called The Man in the Iron Mask, in which Louis Hayward was playing twins, a good twin and an evil twin. And I think it was fairly early, the process of split screen, where they literally cut the screen in half, and the two parts of Louis Hayward playing the two brothers were stuck together technically. And there you had Louis Hayward playing opposite himself. But during the making of the picture, they had to have, or they wanted someone who could play opposite to him to give him, so that he could react to another actor, rather than to, say, the continuity girl or someone just reading the lines to him. And having never stepped into a film studio before in my life, it was the most wonderful training you could think, and to be paid for it. They were frightfully nice, and they were pleased with what I did, but I did also get a small part in the picture, the captain of the guard. I didn't remember the line, I think. I rushed up on a horse and said, "The king wants to see you." In it there was a sequence where I had to fence, and they said, "Do you fence?" And I said, for fear of not getting the job, I said, "Yes, of course, I've been fencing all my life, having never held a foil in my life." So they said, "Well, you'd better just go along to Monsieur Caverne, who is doing the fencing choreography in the picture, just to brush up on your fencing, as it were." So I went along, and Monsieur Caverne handed me a foil in the approved style, and I took it rather like taking a knife and fork. And I saw him look at me, and I said, "I must admit I've never fenced in my life, but I had to say yes to keep this job." So he said, "Well, it is very honest, and you would have offended me had you said you had, because the very way you took the foil showed me that you'd never touched one, and therefore I will teach you how to fence." Two people whom I had the great privilege of working with were Laurel and Hardy in a film called Chumps at Oxford. They were absolutely wonderful. And the little one, Stan Laurel, was the sort of the brains behind the double act. Not that Hardy was by any means a non-entity, but Stan worked out all the business and all the gags. And dear Oliver Hardy ate donuts all the time and was a keychain swinger. He was always swinging his chain, followed by a little dumb waiter pushed by a little blackamoor full of donuts and coffee, which he ate consistently all day long. to keep his weight up. As a complete, shall we say, volte-face in my love of music, from Richard Strauss we come to that glorious Schnozzle-Durand, whom I didn't ever work with in Hollywood, but I did meet him, and I would love to hear with you. You've got to start every day with a song. And that wonderful man, Schnozzle-Durand. War had broken out soon after I arrived in Hollywood, and although I was very glad to have achieved my ambition to get there, I became dreadfully homesick. And it became absolutely chronic, and all I could think about was getting home. Even if one had the money, you couldn't just get on an aeroplane or a boat. Everything was, cut off by then. But I thought, well, the thing is to try and get nearer, so I left Hollywood and came to New York. And I was so homesick, and then I saw a sign outside a hospital saying, "Give blood to Britain." So I popped straight in and said, "Please take a pint for Britain," which they did. And I walked straight out and fell flat on my face, went back again, and they had to give me two to revive me. I went even farther towards getting home, went up to Canada, but I thought at least I was on British territory. And eventually I was able to get home by taking the place of a deserter on a banana boat, which was part of a convoy. And I understood from the captain when we eventually arrived in Liverpool that it was the first time they'd ever used the peacetime route. It only took us 10 days to get home, going at the speed of the slowest boat because it was a convoy of about 30 ships. And they felt it was too obvious a route for the Germans to mind, so we got home without incident. Every able-bodied actor and actress was called up. There were many people who were not fit enough to do anything else and felt they could do their bit by entertaining the troops, and some of them were perhaps not as good as others. And I think hence that marvellous title, Every Night Something Awful. But I think I was very lucky in as much as the play that was offered me was Private Lives by Noel Coward. I started in that play with Sonia Dresdel, and she had been playing in it for about a year and did need a change and a rest indeed, because it was very rigorous life in Ensign. And the lady who took over the part of Amanda in that became my wife, and I met her at all romantic places outside the Drury Lane Theatre in 1942. I'll follow my secret heart from conversation piece. I met Laurence Olivier first through refusing to try and speak with an American accent. I could ill afford not to accept a job from anyone, particularly from him. It was a play he was doing called Born Yesterday, and I thought that would be the last I'd ever see of it. But sure enough, when the film of Hamlet came along, he offered me the part of Osric. There was a sequence where we had to walk down a spiral staircase. Now this was very difficult technically for the sound department, which meant that we had to post-sync the whole sequence. Now post-synchronization is literally what it says. The film is shown on the screen and you have to match the words to your lips, which is not really easy. But between the time I'd shot the scene, 3 months went by before it came to my having to go and post-sync it. And during that time, I'd lost 3 front teeth through abscesses. And there I was with a plate, something very new to me. And I was sort of talking like this when I appeared at the post-syncing session. And Lawrence said, "What on earth's the matter with you?" And I told him what had happened. He said, "Well, I know what's worrying you. You're frightened of spitting at people." So he put his face within about 2 inches of mine and said, "Drown me, because it would be a glorious death, so long as we can hear what you're saying." Laurence Olivier, the first Frankenstein film I did was in 1956. I'd read in, I think, a trade paper that Hammers were to remake Frankenstein, which hadn't been touched since the late 20s when James Whale had directed Boris Karloff and Colin Clive, I believe in the original Frankenstein picture. I don't think any of us thought for a moment that such a snowball would start to grow from that one picture. It was just going to be made as one isolated picture. But it turned out into something beyond all expectation. After, 1956 to now is at least, how many years? 15, 16 years? There have been so many monsters sprawling across our screens, one tends to forget that Madame Frankenstein didn't set out to make a monster. He set out to do the impossible, to create a human being, which he did. And it was his intention to create something for the benefit of mankind, but it all went wrong. I think, the evil that men do lives on after them. The good is interred with their bones. I think this is, the poor old Frankenstein has become known as a bit of a baddie, because he will keep on trying to these do-it-yourself kits of monsters. Hardly music to operate by, but it would be awfully nice to hear some Puccini, particularly Renata Tebaldi singing La Bohème. Everything I've done since 1942 came from association with Helen, my dear wife. Helen and I had most Catholic taste in music, but I know one that she particularly enjoys, and so do I. Perhaps we could all enjoy together the Traute Quintet.